Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Terror on Flat Top Ridge by Johnny Gunn. Narrated by P.J. Ochlan. Chapter 1. It was a gorgeous early fall day when Belmont Town Marshal Mason Thetford rambled out of the office and onto the main street, stretching the previous night's activities from his long frame. "Good morning to you, Mr. Ahern," he said to the banker who was hurrying up onto the sun-dried boardwalk. "Bit of a hurry, are you, this morning? How are them peaches coming along?" Sherman Ahern was not quite 40 years old, young to own a bank. His family back in Boston had sent him west to get him out of their hair. He used family money to establish the Belmont National Bank, and it was a success from the day he opened the doors. He spent a great deal of time developing a peach orchard in this high desert climate, and it was described as a total failure in many ways, none of which slowed the banker's efforts. "Can't say we'll be eating peaches this year, Mace. Late frost. Hell, man, late deep freeze about ruined this year's crop. What's on my mind this morning, though, is Old Man Moss." "What's Bill Moss done now, Mr. Ahern?" William T. Moss ran a huge cattle and horse operation at the north end of the Monitor Valley, with as many as 10 sections of open rangeland under his control. He raised and trained horses for the Army and supplied a lot of beef for northern Nye County, Eureka, and Austin, even trailing some north to the railhead in Bayawawi. Bill Moss had lost his wife in a tragic horse accident and was raising a son and daughter with help from a Paiute woman nanny, who may or may not offer other household pleasantries of a more personal nature. "Fool is behind on his mortgage payments again and is so cavalier about the problem. I lend him the money he needs late every winter, and by this time of the year he's supposed to have it paid back. He makes more than enough from his cattle and horses, and I know the Army has already picked up their remounts." For being as young as he was, Ahern was as querulous as a geezer, and seemed to demand absolute perfection from those around him, despite his own obvious imperfections. "I can't abide a man who won't keep his word, Marshal. I'm more than positive that the Army paid the ranchers and Moss is holding out on me. I keep my obligations, sir." The fact was, the Army had gathered their horses and paid off the ranchers just 2 days ago. The fact that Moss hadn't seen fit to rush to the Belmont Bank with his gold had the little twit in a twit, and Marshal Thetford wanted to laugh right out loud at him. "Well, I shouldn't be bothering you with this nonsense. Have a good day, Marshal," Ahern said, tipping his hat. He double-timed it down the main street toward the San Francisco restaurant for his breakfast of toast and tea. Once a Boston gentleman, always a Boston gentleman. Thetford and one other set of eyes watched as Bill Moss and 2 riders came into town and tied off in front of the restaurant. "This might be fun to watch," he murmured and strode to the restaurant with a wry grin on his face. Thetford was born in El Paso about 30 years earlier, and had drifted into being a lawman when he tried to steal an apple pie from the sheriff's wife, who had it cooling on a windowsill. He remembered telling a friend about that. "The man told me he would whoop me black and blue, pour molasses over my naked body, and drive me through busted cotton bales with a pickaxe if I ever did anything against the law again. The fact that he was my uncle and my father was his deputy made me understand I'd just received a great truth in this adventure called life. I've carried a badge since I turned 15, and Daddy was killed by that crazy Mexican horse thief, Pedro Gonzalez. He called himself Chapo, and my uncle gave me my first deputy badge. Chapo was my first kill, too." Young as he was, Thetford had a reputation around Nevada and Utah as fast to anger, fast to draw, and held little regard for an outlaw's life. He came north from El Paso through the New Mexico and Arizona territories, even spending some time keeping order in California. Thetford settled in Belmont, the Nye County seat when their previous marshal was shot up by bandits roaming up from the southern Utah battles with Indians and cattle ranchers. Belmont was home to ranches, mines, and mills, and far from any other communities of note. The mining town of Austin was near 100 miles northwest, and the ranching community of Eureka was about 100 miles northeast. Belmont, Nevada was not your typical Nevada mining town/county seat. Sure, there were mines and mills, miners and millwrights, but the difference lay in the fact that Belmont was also central to a thriving ranching community that spread out across the length of the Monitor Valley. Several large cattle and horse ranches lay in the Monitor Cradle, with the Tokima Range to the west and the Monitor Range to the east, both ranges offering peaks over 11,000 feet, which in turn provided considerable water to the valley. Those vast mountain ranges also provided places to hide, to drive rustled cattle, and was home to elk, mule deer, and antelope, which found their way to many a supper table. There were constant fights in the corrals, saloons, boardwalks, and stables between young hotheads. Some called themselves cowboys, some called themselves miners, and all knew they were the toughest. Marshal Thetford did everything he could to prove to each of them that he was the toughest. More than one cowboy returned to the ranch and miner to the mine, with knots on his head, teeth missing, and bruises everywhere. Thetford took guff from no one. In the early days of the community, fights over water rights had been vicious, but limited to the immediate area of mines and mills. Fights today were between cowboys and miners over women, poker hands, and status, the same as any other frontier village from the Hudson River to the Pacific Ocean.
"There you are, Sherm,"
Moss said, walking up to Sherman Ahern's table and plopping down in a chair.
"Army finally came through with their money."
He set a large leather pouch on the table.
"This should cover my mortgage and more. Put the leftover on my account. I've always paid my debts, Ahern. I don't appreciate that nasty little note you sent home with my son Jeremy."
Moss's eyes narrowed, his chin jutted some, and Ahern couldn't help but notice that the man was at least twice his size. Sitting in his office, surrounded by oak, walnut, and maple furnishings, Ahern was a gruff banker who felt fully justified in sending a blunt note on a past-due mortgage payment. All that bluster disappeared when someone like Bill Moss confronted him in a cafe.
"You've got a lot of nerve, Buster,"
Moss continued.
"When my herds sell, I pay my bills, and you know it. There's a new bank opened in Eureka, Ahern. You want my business, you better get your manners back. You're a rude man, sir. Good day,"
Moss said loud enough for most of the patrons of the big restaurant to hear. Bill Moss was gruff with everyone. His ranch hands, his children, his late wife, and at the same time was a teddy bear if someone was hurt or sick. The range was open in the Monitor Valley, and the ranchers ran their herds wide open. Branding and ear tagging was essential, and more than one rancher tried to use some run-and iron of others' cattle. Moss's B-bar-M was hard to alter, but there were a few graves filled with those who'd tried. As hard as he was on them from time to time, his children came first at the Moss spread. Young Jeannie was 16, and her brother Jeremy was 18. Jeremy suffered a terrible childhood, sickly and always small for his age. He never grew into any kind of strength either. Jeannie, on the other hand, was tall and scrappy, and absolutely the most beautiful young lady in the Monitor Valley. She could ride the rankest colt, rope the rangiest steers as well as any hand, and still stop a grown man dead in his tracks with her smile. Moss turned to the men with him.
"When we get back to the ranch, you boys gather the rest of the boys and head into the mountains. Bring the herds down for the winter. I'm betting on early snow this year."
He and his two cowboys walked out the door, mounted their ponies, and rode out of town in a cloud of dust. Mason Tetford had to chuckle watching it all, ordered a rasher of bacon, 3 eggs, and a platter of biscuits and gravy.
Don't be cooking those eggs to death, Susie, and put lots of sausage in the gravy. I'm hungry.
Don't know why, she smiled. You ate 2 steaks and a pot of potatoes and gravy last night.
The long, rangy marshal just smiled, sipping his coffee.
Buford, get your butt over here right now.
Humboldt Charley yelled at Buford Gamble, who was tying off his horse. Charley was sitting near a fire drinking his breakfast from a whiskey flask.
You got any word on that army money? You said you'd know today.
Charley was half Paiute and half Louisiana Cajun, and a full-time angry man. There were many in Nevada who were sure that Humboldt Charley was also insane.
Army picked up the horses 2 days ago, Charley,
Buford Gamble said, stepping off his well-lathered horse.
Moss brought the money into Belmont this morning. 2 other ranchers, Slocum and Peabody, brought their money in yesterday. Army paid everyone in gold, not script.
Indian wars were raging in the plains, Rocky Mountains, northern Nevada, and elsewhere in the West, and the Army was buying every horse they could get their hands on. Ranchers like Bill Moss were breeding their herd mares every year, and the Army continued to demand more. Buford Gamble was a Texan, wanted just about everywhere in the West, mostly for his excellent knife work. He stood close to 6 feet and weighed about 250 pounds. He carried a sawed-off 10-gauge shotgun as a saddle gun and a long-barreled Colt as a sidearm. He usually carried at least 2 knives. He'd tangled up with Humboldt Charley several months ago. Humboldt Charley was squat in comparison, but deadlier than Gamble. Charley simply did not have respect for any man, woman, or child, and felt no compassion for life itself. Guns were tools, and tools were meant to be used, efficiently. No one knew what would make Charley angry, and he was known to laugh at a joke and kill the teller of that same joke, too.
Let's ride,
Humboldt Charley said, kicking the fire about. They were camped about 3 miles outside Belmont along what was called Silver Creek. It would be an easy ride into the bustling town.
Buford, you stand outside with that scattergun and the rest of us will take the gold. We'll ride north after we hit the bank.
Humboldt Charley and his gang had been terrorizing areas of Nevada and Utah for some time, robbing banks, rustling herds, and killing anyone attempting to end their actions. The lives of at least 3 lawmen had been lost, along with 5 or more members of thrown-together posses. From the Green River through Salt Lake into Elko and as far west as Reno, wanted posters of the gang were plentiful. In this vast area of the West known as the Great Basin, ranches were immense, measured in tens of sections and unfenced. Villages and communities were separated by distances measured in days, and outlaws had no trouble finding safe places to hole up. Wells Fargo was offering large amounts of gold. The railroad had detectives riding every train passing through, and various county sheriffs and town marshals were ready to kill the gang on sight. What wasn't plentiful in most of Nevada were people or villages. Most of northern Nevada and northwestern Utah was uninhabited, and Charley and his gang could just melt into the high mountain ranges or the flat desert with ease. High mountains flanked lush valleys, snowmelt and spring-fed trout infested streams, and there was game enough to keep the little gang in food. It would take some doing to catch this band of brigands. Charley himself was the meanest of the bunch, Gamble a close second, followed by Spittin' Sam Anson out of Waco, Texas. Anson was more than good with his guns, one of which he carried in a holster and the other simply tucked into his waistband. He was fast and deadly. Psychotic would be the best way to describe his personality, which made him more than just dangerous. You never knew what it would be that would bring incensed anger and lingering death. It was said that Spittin' Sam Anson shot a man in the stomach one night in a saloon somewhere in southern New Mexico territory, just to watch him slowly die a painful and horrible death.
"Kill him, Sam!"
someone yelled, and Sam said, "No, I want to watch this man die hard." Most agreed that Anson didn't weigh 125 pounds after a big supper. After a few snorts around a campfire, he'd throw the bottle in the air and shoot it, showering everyone with broken glass and daring someone to challenge the act. George Oliver was a bank robber out of California, and Enos Payson came west from New Orleans. Some believe that Payson and Humboldt Charley might be related somehow. Oliver loved women, drank more than any of the gang, and Humboldt Charley had threatened to kill him more than once.
"I might have to grab a woman before we hightail it out of town,"
he said, taking a drink from his flask.
"Ain't had a woman since that little floozy in Austin."
"Put that damn bottle away, you fool,"
Charley snapped.
"This is gonna be the biggest hit we've ever had, and you better not screw it up, Oliver."
Charley then took a drink from his own flask, snickering about it as he did.
"That bank might be so loaded with gold right now that we'll have to steal a pack train of mules to carry it off."
Charley laughed, took another long swig from his flask, smiled wickedly at Oliver, and led the gang out of the little canyon and onto the main road to Belmont.
"We'll ride north to the Eureka Road and eventually up through the Diamond Valley, boys. I doubt there'll be a posse to come after us, but if there is, George, you and Spittin' Sam hold back and take care of him."
Spittin' Sam liked that idea, but George was frowning as they loped toward town. Chapter 2. Nobody paid much attention to the 5 men riding into town. After all, cowboys from several ranches were always coming and going, and shift changes at the mines and mills meant people moving about often. Charley led the group right down the main street, and they tied their horses off in front of the Belmont National Bank. The bank sat on the east side of the main street. The Belmont Courthouse, an imposing brick structure, was off to the west about a block or so and housed all the county offices. Town Marshal Tetford had his office on the main floor of the courthouse, tucked away from the county sheriff's large offices, while the district attorney felt more comfortable on the second floor near the district judge's office. Buford eased out of the saddle, held the scattergun tight to the side of his leg, and stood near the large and heavy front doors of the bank. There wasn't much foot traffic near the bank, with most of the action centered a block down the street at the Cosmopolitan Saloon. Charley led the group into the brick and stone building. The men had their bandanas pulled up across their noses, and their hats scrunched down low and tight. Charley, Sam, George, and Enos pulled their weapons, and Humboldt Charley barked,
"This is a hold-up. Anyone moves wrong or fast dies."
He leaped across the low banister and shoved his revolver into the cashier's face. Old Moses Peterson had been the bank's front man from day one and had feared a robbery such as this the entire time. His knees buckled when that huge gun was shoved in his face. He gripped the edge of the counter and watched helplessly as the bank seemed to spin slowly around. He was on the floor, unconscious, in 2 seconds. Hannibal Wakely stepped out of the vault at that moment and was never closer to death. Charley spun on the movement and almost pulled the trigger.
"Get the gold in these saddlebags now!"
He screamed at the young man and threw 5 sets of saddlebags across the cashier's cage. A small and aged woman near the cage started to faint, and her elderly husband made a grab for her. Spittin' Sam Anson misread the move and put 2 heavy chunks of lead in the middle of his chest.
"That'll bring 'em running. Damn it, Sam! All right, let's move. Get those bags filled."
Charlie's eyes never slowed down, trying to see everything in every nook and cranny in the bank, every speck of dust, anything that he might consider a threat. Some at the San Francisco Cafe looked around at the sound of gunfire, but didn't get too excited. The arrogant young banker scoffed when someone suggested that maybe they were after his gold. He sipped his tea and ignored the riffraff. Wakely was stuffing gold coins into the large leather saddlebags as fast as he could, and knew that he might die at any moment. The look on what he could see of Charlie's face terrified him. They were the eyes of a madman searching for trouble, and had Wakely convinced he would die before they left. Gamble jerked at the sound of the gunshots and brought the shotgun to the ready, but there didn't seem to be much reaction from those outside the bank. After all, this was a mining town. Underground blasting went on in the various mines day and night. Ugly little barroom disputes ended with wild gunfire sometimes, and unless it was the sound of a bullet passing too close to one's head, well, somebody was just having some fun. Buford could hear the activity inside and moved to cover the men when they came out at the run. George Oliver and Enos Payson shoved Wakely out of the way and jammed as many gold coins as they could into the bags.
"There's more gold than we have room for, Charlie," Payson hollered with a giggle in his voice.
"Fill 'em up and let's go. We're running out of time here."
Charlie was waving his revolver at two customers, and Spittin' Sam was standing near the dead man and his unconscious wife.
"Grab those bags and let's go."
Charlie all but screamed. George was dragging 3 bags and Enos 2. Charlie grabbed one and Sam another, and they hit the front doors. Despite the gunshots, no one seemed to be paying attention. But then again, this was a mining town built right on top of the mines. Steam engines pounded constantly, and it wasn't unusual for a drunk miner or cowboy to fire off a round or two just for the hell of it. It took some effort to get the saddlebags on the horses and get mounted. They were at a full gallop and on the way out of town in less than 2 minutes.
"Let's ride hard for a few minutes and then pull back. No need to kill the horses,"
Charlie hollered. Hannibal Wakely grabbed a shotgun and ran out onto the sidewalk and fired the scattergun to absolutely no effect. The outlaws at least 2 full blocks away by that time. People slowly made their way out of businesses and homes and toward the bank. Belmont simply didn't have any criminal activity to speak of, and a bank robbery in broad daylight didn't enter their minds.
"Were those gunshots?"
Tetford asked his chief deputy, Timothy Kleinfeld.
"Sounded like it to me,"
Kleinfeld answered. He walked over to the door and stepped out onto the broad stone porch of the courthouse.
"Maybe near the bank, Mason. Want me to check it out?"
"No, you've got lunch coming. Sit still, I'll walk over."
Mason Tetford stepped out onto the street to walk the 2 blocks up to the bank. He was still a block away when he saw 5 riders hightail it out of town, and 2 men running out of the bank yelling at them. When the cashier fired his shotgun, Tetford headed back to the office at a run.
"Damn it,"
he snarled, grabbed a rifle off the rack, and yelled at Kleinfeld.
"Bank robbery! Get a posse together. They're headed north. Catch up to me as fast as you can."
Then he jumped on his horse and rode north fast. When he made a sharp turn near the mill and topped the little hill that led out of Belmont, he could see dust several miles ahead of him. He kept his horse in a hard run, but knew he would run out of horse before he could catch up to the robbers. After 10 minutes of hard running, Charlie held the group up.
"Spittin' Sam, why don't you hold back somewhere around here and kill anyone trying to follow us? Meet us back at that camp near the Moss Ranch. Hand me your saddlebags."
He turned the group and led them off at a good trot. It would be a long 30 miles to the Moss Ranch, and they wouldn't make it until well after sunset. Sam Anson wanted to argue about the saddlebags, but knew why Charlie took them.
"I ain't gonna get killed, Charlie. So you keep this gold safe, so's I gets my share."
Charlie just smiled at him and rode off. Sam knew the area where the long north-south road made a wide sweeping turn to the west and then straightened out to run north again. Off to his left he could see the Pine Creek Ranch sitting at the base of the Tokima Range, some 5 miles off. Spittin' Sam found an arroyo and led his horse down into the soft sand at the bottom and tied him off to a clump of brush. "That'll keep you out of sight," he murmured, and found some heavy sagebrush at the lip of the arroyo where he could hide and wait for whoever might come along. "Charlie's still angry about me killing that old boy, but he wouldn't be if that guy had actually been going for a gun. He better not be running out on me." After several minutes of hard riding, Tetford pulled back to a fast trot and was eating up the miles. The dust from the gang was still visible, but when they made the turn around the Eric Thompson Ranch at Pine Creek, he knew they were gaining on him. He continued to follow, hoping that Kleinfeld could get a posse formed and catch up. Every little canyon from the Tokima Range on the west and the Monitor Range on the east drained into the valley, and during heavy thunderstorms and spring thaw, those creeks ran full. This time of year, many were either barely there or dried up, and the creek beds, arroyos, were plentiful. Large elk herds came down to winter in the valley, and herds of antelope surged up and down the valley. Tetford brought his horse down to a walk to let him catch his breath, and was surprised to hear another horse nicker softly as he neared an arroyo that had carved out some of the valley to his right. He pulled his horse to a stop quickly and started to dismount, when a bullet tore into his leg. He toppled to the ground and crawled as quickly as he could into some sage at the side of the road. His horse stood quietly, and Tetford could see his rifle sitting comfortably in its saddle scabbard. "Damn it," he sputtered, pulling his revolver. No other shots had been fired, and he hadn't seen who shot him. "Fact is, I didn't hear the damn shot till I was halfway to the ground." Bullets travel a whole lot faster than sound. Hard as he listened, he couldn't hear anything moving. Every nerve ending quivered with anticipation, but there was no sound except his own groans when he moved. Did someone shoot and run? Not likely. He's got to find out for sure that I'm dead, and that means he needs to come to me. It was a long 5 minutes before he heard the faintest rustle. He's coming up the gulch. The marshal slowly turned his attention from the road to the dry stream bed a few yards behind him. Just the barest sound of boots moving through the loose sand and gravel gave Spittin' Sam's position away. "I'm gonna see your ugly self in just a minute, pissant, and you're gonna die. I don't like people shooting me." Tetford was on his belly, his leg aching like it was not only shot, but broke too, and he knew that he wasn't going to be conscious for too much longer if he didn't stop the bleeding. "I've got to concentrate on killing this fool, and then stop the bleeding. So hurry up, fool, and make your move." Sam knew he had to be close to where the man was, but didn't want to stand up and look over the top of the arroyo and give his position away. Just 'cause he shot him didn't mean he was dead. He made his way cautiously, trying to make as little noise as possible. He was listening for any kind of sound, but heard nothing, and finally knew he had to look. He crept up as close to the side of the gully as he could, and peeked carefully over the top. He could see the man's horse, but wasn't up high enough to see the road, to make sure the man's body was dead and cold. Mason Tetford saw a slight movement just to his left, and watched as a crumpled hat slowly emerged from the edge of the gully. "Wait, not yet. Let's see a little more of you, fool. There." The .45 barked, and the top half of Spittin' Sam's head exploded. Tetford slipped the weapon back in its leather, rolled onto his back, and sat up, moving so he could lean against a sage. He pulled his scarf, wadded it up, and pressed it hard onto the leg wound.
"Oh, damn, that hurts,"
he bellowed. He could feel the bone.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?